Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. Today's podcast is focused on the interesting topic of moving from a project-oriented organization to one that is product-centric. Product is a key unifying idea in the digital age, but change into that orientation can be challenging. So I'm very excited to have joined me on this podcast, long-term friend, ex-colleague, Dr. Mik Kersten, CTO of Planview, and author of a fantastic book that I actually reviewed on a very, very, very long flight, A Project to Product. Welcome to the podcast, Mik.
Thank you, Dave. It's great to be here. And I didn't realize it was actually all done on the flight. So I'm glad that flight was long because the feedback you gave on that very early draft of the book was instrumental. So glad you still fly around the world.
Yeah, yes, it was one of those flights. You know those flights where you've seen every movie? Not that I'm saying I wouldn't have spent the time, but I'd seen every movie and I wasn't tired. So and then when I got into it, it was almost impossible to put down. It's such a good book, and I do recommend it to anybody that's on this journey. Particularly some of the early sections provide some amazing, amazing context. So thank you for writing that book, Mik, and welcome to the podcast.
My pleasure, Dave. And I'm sure that some of the last two chapters might have put you to sleep as well. So hopefully that helped out too.
No. For our listeners, do not believe a word he says. The last two chapters are hard, I'm not going to lie, but they're actually very, very valuable. So today we're going to be talking about this kind of thorny topic. You wrote the book. What year did you write the book, Mik?
2018, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So a few years ago, but it seems now that project to product is even more relevant. But when you were writing the book, what you titled it Project to Product, and it sort of came in from stage left for me. I'm like, this is an interesting title. So why did you call it Project to Product, Mik? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, it came stage left. Anyone in a technology company, that the title made no sense to. So because we just, and to me, the concept made no sense initially. So I think it was actually me wrapping my head around that this is not the way everyone builds software. That the organizations you and I were working with at that time, and many that we continue to work with, they actually prefer the mode of throwing work over the fence to technology teams, and not actually setting up these feedback loops between business and technology and strategy and customer feedback in these product value streams, and instead just planning out the work in just these, it was still snapping back to waterfall fashion and project budgeting and all of that, and that basically that inconsistency is what I realized was the problem, is that we'd all grown up around, yourself, myself, a lot of our colleagues, around building great products and creating value streams that drove innovation, rather than having this way of throwing the work over the fence. And I realized there's just this massive difference in mindset and operating model between companies that were doing digital innovation, just, tech companies, startups, unicorns, and the like, and the way that enterprises were working. And so, yeah, but it was a really interesting response, is the people who'd grown up in this, that the title made no sense to. It's everything is, you were just always driving innovation through products. Projects are still a good thing. What's the issue? So.
And I remember the actual moment. So I sat down. You'd sent me the manuscript. It was long, and I was like, nothing to watch on the video system. And I opened it up, and I was like, and I saw the title, and I was like, no, we can't call it this. That's just ridiculous. That's a silly idea. And then I started reading, and the early chapters talk a lot about BMW and car manufacturing, and I've subsequently also visited that particular factory. So thank you for the connection. And this moment, it's sort of like realization of flow and of the focus on outcomes and the manner, et cetera, et cetera. Was that when this all became real, when you spent the time with these organizations that were building very sophisticated products, like cars or software products, or is that when it happened, when this realization happened?
It was it was over this 2 3 month period when I realized, just having spent, and there's the big bang story in the book, is
Yeah.
realizing that these organizations were going agile, and they were just creating agile teams, right? And what you were calling at that point in time, the water scrum fall, a term I still hear regularly, and we still see very regularly. Based in organizations, it's a flawed organization design that we're seeing. And I realized that the problem was not with these organizations' ability to make agile teams or squads or whatever they were doing at that point. Scrum was gaining ground and helping at that team level, but that everything above the team level was the wrong operating model. So Agile, of course, was meant to be bigger than just teams, and was around feedback loop, and was around lead, and was around these things we call product concepts. But I realized that if the way that you're funding and organizing and investing in technology is entirely through projects, you're actually going against all those agile principles. And that we needed a new way of looking at it, and a new way, a new organizational and operating model for these large companies. So the realization was, well, in all these large enterprises, this is not happening. And then seeing that how everything was just beautifully aligned to product value streams in a car manufacturer made me realize, okay, it's not that this is impossible at these large enterprises. It's just that they're not thinking about it the right way.
And so, and the why now is also kind of interesting as well. So this was what, 5 6 years ago that you were thinking about this, but it seems to be even more relevant now. Do you think it's because digital, the rise of LLMs, the rise of the importance digital is in every single enterprise has made this even more relevant again, or even more relevant, as it were?
Yeah, I think it is that. I think there's just been this very long wave of digital transformation, and it's still continuing, and it's still, we're still saying the same things as we were saying 10 years ago, which is it's still not producing the expected results. And I think organizations have realized that Agile, that Scrum practices, that these are good things, but that they need to be scaled up, and they need to be scaled up to the team of teams level, and all the way up to the way that strategy and leadership functions. And so I think AI and cloud have definitely pushed on that, because if you're, moving to cloud and your costs are growing, not decreasing, you realize something's wrong. Something's wrong in the way that you're actually funding and investing and in technology. And that's happened. There's a lot of organizations have realized that, and they realize they're not even able to measure cloud costs for their value stream, so they actually can't get the right view of the footprint. It's as if a car manufacturer did not know the cost of manufacturing a particular car or model. How would the CFO let the organization get away with that? So, but yet that's where we are. So I think that it's the growing investment technology that's made both the finance organization and basically strategy and leadership realize that these agile concepts can't just be at the team level, that they actually need to be how the entire business functions. And it's surprising, to your point, Dave. It's been 6 years how long it's taking. And I think we are seeing it's certainly what we're seeing. I think a lot more organizations at that leadership and operations level realizing they need to make the shift, but still quite lost in terms of how to execute on that.
So, and ultimately, it seems to mean to me that organizations need to, as you rightly said, adopt this product mindset, align around products, and then fund and around products, and then build an operating model that sort of operationalize it. But those organizations are finding it incredibly hard. Do we have examples of organizations that have successfully transitioned to those bits, or is it, there's elements of their business that they've got the mindset and maybe they've aligned, but they're still funding using projects, or if we have we seen successful complete transitions to this approach?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And a year and a half ago, we decided to do a study, the Project Product State of the Industry Survey, to try to get a better sense of this. And in that set, this was a set of 36 different organizations and a couple few that where we measured their data. So they were by the nature of that study, the organizations we had data for was actually coming from the Planview Viz solution. So that was a little bit of self-selection, but it had a much broader survey component as well. So a few hundred organizations in the survey. And what we saw connecting those two data sets, both the survey data and the actual system data of how are they organizing, how is work flowing, is that a third across that set was actually scaling their product operating model. So it means that they had created product value streams, that they were organizing according to those value streams, and that they were scaling this up. So 2/3, by the way, in the set of organizations, 2/3 had started the effort. They had started making the shift, but not operationalized it sufficiently for that to meet our criteria. For example, understanding dependencies between value streams, right? That's one of the things that we test for. Understanding how much what the capacity of each value stream is, and so on. So I think what's happening now is we have absolutely seen organizations that have done this at scale with success. Success does not necessarily mean that every single aspect of what product operating model has been fully implemented. I think it just means that the structure's in place. So the product value streams are all defined, that the product value streams are measured, that there's an alignment between basically the value streams that people doing the work, so the organizational structure, so that you don't just have agile teams, you actually have those probably structured into teams of teams, and that those are aligned to value streams, and that basically the architecture of the software of your digital offerings is aligned to that as well. So there are absolutely some I think some really interesting success stories of organizations who've done this. Organizations of I think you'll might remember them. CBA, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, they've made some amazing progress on this, and it really is around putting together all of the pieces, right? Because maybe in the early starts of the journey, we always our whole approach is make sure that you're measuring flow, you're seeing flow, so you understand why you need to do this. What's the ROI on doing it? But then, of course, flow is just not enough. So, making sure that you're actually connecting to some kind of outcomes. So things like OKRs and so on, that you're putting in place these product management practices such as planning and roadmaps, not just really elevating what the Scrum teams are doing to what you're replacing. You're replacing Gantt charts and project plans with roadmaps and funding capacity. So when those elements are in place, we now have a very good number of large organizations, and it does tend to be the earlier adopters who've actually made that transition in terms of their operating model. And of course, then the later stages of the transition are things like capacity-based funding for persistent value streams. The same way we love persistent teams and not mucking with team structure all the time, just evolving it to remove burden out of the system. We're seeing the same things at the product value stream level as well.
Yeah, our data, we surveyed about 4,500 organizations, and we found very similar data to you. We found that majority, 70%, are actually somehow aligned to product, but only probably about 20 to 30% of them were actually really kind of delivering it in that way, and which is very consistent with the data
That's
that you
super
see.
consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is really interesting. So, you mentioned some of the key indicators for success. You mentioned, the ultimate destination is long-lived, clear, basically managing your product portfolio, looking at the capacity, looking at the value, managing in a consistent and unorganized way. What are some of the sort of you talked about managing flow and having flow metrics in place. You talked a little bit about total cost of ownership, business roadmaps, things like that. What are the sort of like broad kind of indicators of we're on this journey and we're being successful?
Well, I think you actually just rhymed off the key ones, right? And you added one which I didn't, which I think is at a business level, it becomes the most important one, is that you are managing a portfolio of products, which means you can see that portfolio, you understand what you're investing in it, and you understand the value that you're getting from each of those products. So an interesting telltale sign, which is I think kind of late in the journey, is that organizations, when they see this portfolio, they know where to double down. And this is whether the macro environment is driving more investment or more cost cutting or rebalancing, and or they know where to pull back, right? So if you ask a technology leaders, what are the last 3 products that you've sunset? They need to have that portfolio view. And Dave, I know you've helped me sunset some. And because of course products have a life cycle. And so if you actually start looking at products at a portfolio and deciding, well, where, just like you might look at a stock portfolio, where in this portfolio do I want to invest? What's my cost basis for this? What's in the end, the life cycle profitability, which Don Reinerson tells us is the #1 thing to optimize for as you look at a product portfolio. That's really the telltale sign, is when the organizational and really the layers of leadership down from the CEO are actually managing and measuring that way, where that portfolio, reviewing that portfolio becomes a part of the quarterly business reviews, right? So the same way that we're doing and that's actually connected to our Scrum cadences, right? So I think the one I would add to the set that you had, because you mentioned the managing the product portfolio, is actually aligning the management of that portfolio to your agile planning as well. So you understand, for example, we might need to move one of our Scrum teams between these 2 value streams because we're investing more in our backend services right now, or our APIs, and they need more capacity there, rather than looking at, okay, let's add 4 more resources from a contractor on that team, which doesn't really work. So it's making sure that you've got visibility into the portfolio, and then you're applying agile principles to how you manage that, because really the capacity for that portfolio is defined by the agile team supporting it. So the other thing that was going to say, the other thing as one of these success indicators is actually seeing the business planning and strategic planning cadences and the agile cadences aligned and connected.
Yeah, I I have to say though, this is rare still. I know you said a
Rare.
third, but out of that third, to see that complete transformation, that complete consistency. And the thing that's annoying, Mick, and I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute, is it's just so obvious. It's just so obvious that when you step back from an organization's ability to innovate digital technology and how fundamental digital is to everything that they do, but they still operate in this free lunch kind of like, we can invest in something and disappear. I was talking to a lady. I was at the product owner conference in the Netherlands, 850 product owners. It was absolutely one of the most refreshing agile conferences I've been to in a long time. I was talking to this lady who works at the Natural History Museum in the Netherlands, and she was talking about how the fact that they because they have a project oriented approach, and they create these amazing products, and then they go on to the next thing, and then they go on to the next thing, and then they go on to the next thing, and then somebody's using this product that they created 4 project planning cycles ago, and they're like, well, hang on a minute, it's no longer secure because was on an infrastructure that's, how do I need to change it to support this new biodiversity indicator or whatever? I don't know much about biology. As proven by me just even using those words, biodiversity. But the point is, and it was just like, well, and then the business gets it. They're incredibly smart, and the technology people get it, but there seems to be this disconnect. Why is it such a problem? Why is success so challenging in this regard from your perspective?
Well, and so I'll just I think first of all, it is like, so I think we're seeing this. So just, I know in my own coaching and support of these organizations, one of the first things I ask right now is what do you do on your QBRs, on your quarterly business reviews? Because it is challenged and it's disconnected, right? And you'll have the people on the technology side who actually have got their act together on Scrum of Sums. They've got their product backlogs, right? They've got their Nexus sprint planning, whatever they've set up. It'll be there, but it'll be connected from the quarterly business reviews. And of course, the work being planned for them is then disconnected from their capacity. So there's basically all of these great ideas coming from the chief digital officer's office, wherever else, on things that should be built. They're completely disconnected from the reality of what can be built and how it should be built. And then, of course, there'll be a lot of people on the technology side who have great ideas as well on things that can be built with, let's say the technology platforms that are there today and the investments that have been made to date. So it's back to this thing, right? And this is really the difference in the product operating model. Business and technology are not separated. So I think as long as we've got disconnected agile planning cadence from a disconnected business planning cadence, you're not a product company, you're not a technology company. And so this is, I think, as simple as connecting. And of course, this means the retrospective, right? Your sprint retrospectives, your Nexus retrospectives, those have to be connected to the reviews you do in your quarterly business reviews and in the retrospectives that you did on sales and marketing. But it is, as you said, Dave, it actually is that simple. So I think it's a great question as to why organizations have been so challenged in putting this in place. And I think a lot of the guidance that they're getting is just to scale this thing out from technology rather than actually looking at, okay, well, here's how you redo your operating model that connects business and technology.
And I think that's key. I think ultimately organizations need to accept this paradigm. I talk about, the product as a mindset, an alignment, and a funding model. And if you can get those three things aligned around this product, then amazing things happen. And the most amazing thing is it becomes simpler. Everything gets simple because strategy is connected to execution. There's no okay, this is our business strategy. Okay, now we need to go away for a month and create our technology strategy. Oh, and then we need to go away, and it's just seamless. It flows through and just makes sense. Measures make sense all the way across. It just gets very, very straightforward.
That is, I think, such an important point. I think that's one where organizations just need more guidance on the fact that it does get simpler, because when you don't have this in place, so you've got a business planning cadence, you've got your agile, Scrum planning cadence, and then you're mapping the two. And you're mapping the two because there's an offset of multiple weeks, right? There'll be kind of sprint and quarterly and monthly and quarterly cadences on both, but they're offset. So now you're doing mapping. The way you're funding the work being done by the Scrum teams, of course, is now a different mapping, because you've got project codes or programs that have to be mapped to in the end, what's doing, the people doing the work, which is the teams. So the complexity of that mapping is at scale is just mind blowing. And I think people underappreciate exactly what you said, which is that creating these as part of one process and one operating model actually simplifies things tremendously. Like the finance team will rejoice because they're not being constantly asked to move around project codes and reallocate, right? So the simplification, and this is the simplification that technology natives live and breathe every day. So then even understand, and this was back to the project to product thing. I never quite appreciated the complexity that these companies had put in place and the overhead and all that waste from having these completely misaligned delivery and production models.
Yes, I spend an awful lot of time talking to people that sole job in life is to do translations.
Yep.
And there's entire departments of people who review the disconnects between these two worlds and manage it to some level. And those people could be delivering so much more valuable work. They could be creating innovation. They could be helping customers go, complete their journeys or extend their journeys with the products. It's so disappointing. And instead, what they're doing is managing translations between the business and technology. And I hope, no, I believe, let's stop the word hope. I believe that product is going to enable organizations to really manage this transition to digital age fully, and really navigate finally away from water scrum fall and other perils that are these two disconnected organizations trying to work together.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think we're at the point where there has been enough of a acceptance of the fact these product operating models work. And enough evidence, both from tech companies and from the first batch of enterprises and other organizations who've successfully made this shift. And so now it's really a question of, well, how are you going to operationalize it in your organization? Because others have done it. And the time to market, time to value, feedback cycles, the simplification are just massive. So
Yeah, I mean the data does support it. McKinsey did a study where they found that that it is directly correlated, and they have lots of smart mathematicians or statistics people, and they said that it's basically that this product operating model directly correlates to business performance. Simple
Yeah,
as that,
exactly. No,
including share
yep.
price, which is like, oh my God, well then that is important, and it's going to affect our 401ks or whatever. But so that's good. So that's cool. So all right. So and I know we could talk about this for days, Mick. I'll be honest, and there might be an opportunity to continue this conversation, but we'll call that out at the end. But we have to unfortunately wrap this up. So for our listeners, you're sort of sitting there, or maybe you're on your Peloton bike, or you're in a commute, or you're on a train or a plane, or maybe you're just ironing shirts, which is a hobby that you and I both love. What would you tell them to start with? Maybe they're somewhere on this journey, but what should they be thinking about the most? What would you encourage them to start thinking about?
So I'll throw it something new, something that I've been
Oh,
encouraging people lately on this. I think related to what we've been talking about is because I think we talked about a lot about the success criteria has to be put in place. I would start with just basically redesigning your quarterly business review. So, and it might feel a little bit waterfallish that it's only on a quarterly basis, but I actually find it forces that conversation with business and technology to at least on a quarterly cadence connect up the backlogs with the business outcomes that are needed, with actually reviewing the right things like do we have enough capacity, what are our bottlenecks, and all of those sorts of things. So just redesign your QBRs around the product operating model and just start there, and then improve it every quarter, right? Because the whole point of this is data driven continuous improvement. So then improve it some the following quarter. And what happens, and there's already so much groundswell around agile in these organizations, around DevOps, around all these practices. That's really that keystone that needs to be addressed, because if it doesn't change, if you don't start the process of changing that, again, you'll never realign and simplify in the way that we described.
actually, and that there's an organization that I work with called Dino Therapeutics, AI plus CRISPR technology. They're using AI to basically make smart decisions about the protocols that they're doing the CRISPR stuff. Gosh, I've talked about biology a lot today. I think must be seeping in living in Massachusetts. But the what's interesting about them is that they were relatively small and they grew because they've been incredibly successful, and they're an amazing organization with some scientists that are going to cure some of the most horrible genetic diseases that this world has ever seen. And so I'm really excited about the work that they're doing. But what's interesting is they scaled, were finding they're doing Scrum and Agile, and they've got these cross-functional teams, technologists, scientists, research associates. And what they found as they scaled, that they had to take a step back and really align those quarterly business reviews. They work in a quarterly, they use OKRs and have a very clear quarterly cadence, even though they're incredibly agile, and even though some of the experiments fail in hours or minutes, maybe, I don't know. But they have this quarterly, and they literally did exactly what you described, and they reset
Hmm.
their entire cadence to be, and because of that, it drove this adoption. And their products are really interesting because their products align around outcomes and diseases or problem sets, or I don't know what you want to call them. And so what they've found is that this helped them realign around this and really help that cadence. So it's interesting that you mentioned quarterly business reviews, but I have some evidence that would support that, which is really, really, really cool.
That's a great.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, so thank you for spending the time. And before we go though, we do have to do a shout out. There is a pretty amazing event about to happen, and that is the Project to Product Summit. That's hard to say, isn't it? Project to Product Summit, that both of us are speaking at.
Yeah.
They wouldn't allow us to be on stage together because of the certain legal reasons that will stop that ever since the last time we did that. But we are both going to be there, and we're going to be presenting some of these ideas. What are you going to be talking about at the summit, Mick?
Oh, that's a great question, Dave. I think so. I'm just putting together my talk right now. I think it'll. I'll just extend this conversation into my slides because I think we did hit on some of the key topics. And for me, it's just we just need to see those organizations moving faster at that, and really the catalysts and for moving faster, like complete revamping your QBRs tomorrow. So.
Oh, yeah. And I'm actually going to be talking about the Agile product operating model and how do you get there? How do you move to it? Because increasingly, organizations, as they're scaling Scrum and Agile, whether it's using Safe or less or elements of Nexus or combination of all of them, which many of them are, that they're sort of reached this ceiling. And so how do we move to that next level? So I'm going to be talking, so I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle, but I think we're going to end up providing the audience and many other talks that are going to be providing the audience with really some very practical things that they can take away and take advantage of this opportunity, this I want to say revolution that's happening around us around. So I'm excited to be speaking there, as I know you are. So listeners, if you're interested in joining this event, there's both an executive event where we sort of talk at a very high level and talk about some of those QBRs and all that stuff, or the general event where we'll be very much focused on some of the practical things. We've got those two events. Feel free to go to product-summit.com, sign up to attend some amazing speakers and there's going to be some really interesting things that are going to come out of this event. And if you sign up, there's an online event that you can attend. And obviously some of these sessions will be recorded. So if you sign up, you'll get access to those recordings if you have to pop out and go to your quarterly business review or do what, sort of like real work, as it were, during the day. So please attend. That's productsummit.com. They'll be on the notes for this podcast. If you just click on those, you can see it, and then you can click straight there. So, Mik, thank you for spending the time today. Really enjoyed this talk as always.
Thank you, Dave. Great chatting with you. And yeah, looking forward to the Product Summit as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for listening today, everybody. This is the Scrum.org community podcast. If you liked what you heard, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, come back to listen to some more. I'm a very lucky person. I get to have a variety of guests talking about everything in the area of professional Scrum, product thinking, as you heard today, and of course, Agile. Thank you, everybody, and Scrum on.